Capcom is really bad with its franchises, and I'm not talking about Resident Evil or Street Fighter or Monster Hunter. I'm talking about the back catalogue. Because they have a lot of IPs they either haven't touched in decades, or they have taken to parading their corpse around just to mock us. And among them is the Lost Planet series. Well, I say series, it has 3 games in it, but one of them is basically unplayable, and the other should never be played, so we're left with Lost Planet Extreme Condition. No, left implies it's a bad game, but it really isn't. In fact, it is even one of my favourite games of all time, but damn if it isn't a game of its time. So let's see if we can bring it up to more modern standards. Let's remake Lost Planet 1. As always, same rules apply. Focus on gameplay and plot rather than the nitty-gritty of UI and graphics. Changes have to be meaningful improvements to the game, and it has to be recognisable as the original product. With that out of the way, let's get started. Here's the thing, Lost Planet is a third-person shooter from the 7th generation, but fortunately it came out before Gears of War popularised buff dudes and magnetic chest-high walls. But unfortunately, this was the formative years of the subgenre, so gameplay can be lovingly described as jank as balls. Not terrible by any means, but ooh. That being the case though, it leaves a lot of room to improve. Firstly, let's update mechanics to be more in line with the sequel. This would mean more responsive gameplay, faster rolls and jumps, and an actual sprint button, because Wayne moves like continental drift, so levels, specifically the early ones, end up being much longer than they should be. Also introduce manual healing rather than instantly regenerating the moment you take damage, which would add to the overall difficulty because instantly healing to max on normal trivialises all but 2 encounters. Next, let's look at improving the grappling hook. There are very few games that aren't made better by the introduction of a grappling hook, and Lost Planet is no exception. The problem, if you can call it that, is that, like the rest of the game, it feels very slow. Long start, long delay after use, and you can't do anything during. So I propose the following. 1. Add control and momentum to the hook. Have it so the pull has to be triggered with a second press, and that you can slingshot with it when you release at the right time, as well as the ability to swing with it when suspended from ledges or ceilings. And 2. Allow the player to fire during, or at least queue up an action while the grapple is active. It was one of the first grappling hooks in gaming to my knowledge, and it deserves to be brought back to the highest standard possible. There's one more thing that needs touching on here, however before we do, we need to also quickly talk about VS gameplay. I absolutely love Vital Suits, they are probably my favourite mech designs of all time, a special place for my beloved hardballer. Look at this beautiful little guy. Look at him. Sorry, gameplay, right. They are primarily there to handle more extreme traversal, bosses and general large enemy encounters, and while I love them to death there are some glaring issues. Fixable issues though. Firstly, there needs to be greater differentiation between the different models as well as improving their strengths, because there is a very clear pecking order that goes as follows: Hardballer, the Grand Seed, everything else, and then the evacs right at the bottom, with the Cactian phase sitting somewhere to the side with their own niche uses. But otherwise, there isn't a lot of difference between them. They seem to have the same amount of health for the most part, and can all use the same weapons, so it all comes down to mobility, which my dear Hardballer has in spades. It also has a saw arm. The others don't have saw arms. They don't even have arms. To fix this, I think the Hardballer should have lowered health compared to the others, Drioa and Nida should be beefier and slightly faster, and the Evax bike should actually be faster and allow you to use your weapons while piloting. While it probably wouldn't dethrone my sexy Hardballer, it would definitely give it a run for its money. Next, improve the aiming in the VS. This is a rather minor one honestly, but the reticle doesn't really line up with where the shots go beyond a certain point. There's also the issue where if you aim up too far or against a wall, you can't actually see where you're aiming because you have robot ass in your face. You could maybe add the aiming thing you have on foot where you can zoom into first person view, or perhaps have something more akin to Armored Core's lock-on system. Now that's out of the way, back to the one more thing I was talking about earlier, and it's a doozy. Fix the weapon balancing. This is mostly an on-foot problem but kind of extends to VS as well, because in all the encounters, getting a rifle early or a plasma gun late just wins you the fight. The shotgun feels like ass to use, the energy gun generally seems to do nothing, and the rocket launcher you typically want to keep for large acre or VS, but when you're fighting these enemies you have likely got a VS already, so it's moot. And even if you didn't, due to the damage and the functionally limitless ammo of the plasma gun, it actually ends up being better for those fights than the rocket launcher anyway. So, changes are definitely needed. Make the plasma gun do less damage overall or cost more to fire. Increase the range or spread of the shotgun, and maybe have the full charge energy gun explode or stun in a wide area when it hits. And on the VS side, well, there isn't much, but I would like the chain gun to do more damage to foot soldiers than it currently does. It's basically a less accurate machine gun against them. Speaking of foot soldiers, let's improve their AI a bit and make them actually fight like a unit rather than just running around willy-nilly and not reacting to gunshots. You could maybe add a commander type enemy that gives orders and makes them more coordinated while they're active. Something to make the enemy encounters a little more tense and difficult. One last little thing and a very personal gripe of mine is when you pick up a VS weapon, make it so that it stores your regular weapon and doesn't make you drop it, because as it stands now you basically end up having to cycle through weapons just so you can actually move things around on a VS, which is, well, it's not fun, is it? Something that people don't really talk about in Lost Planet is the level design, which is to be expected if I'm honest. Normally the setting and levels are just a backdrop to the shooty bang bang gameplay and not typically worth giving a crap about, but I feel like Lost Planet could definitely do with some love in this field. Firstly, let's make the level designs thematically consistent. Brief overview for those who have never played the game and have stumbled onto this video by mistake. Also hi, I guess. Lost Planet takes place on EDN3, a planet that wants to kill the humans that have tried to colonize twice before. Now, this game takes place in the future and 150-ish since the first attempt. With this in mind, why are the ruins a mix between neoclassical architecture and modern high-rises? We're in the future, you'd expect to be a bit more industrial and heavy-duty to survive the extreme conditions and swarms of death bugs. It would simply be a case of swapping out assets if that's all you wanted to do, but there's always more. Next, give more routes through the levels. Shooters are known for being very linear, without much exploration or deviation from the main path, but with the improved grapple hook we could add more secret routes through the levels, as well as more verticality to combat encounters, which would in turn allow for more aerial or climbing enemies without being too overwhelming. Bosses and shooters usually aren't that good, honestly. Sure, there are those outliers that are absolutely amazing, namely Ultra Kill and its ilk, but it mostly boils down to unloading questionable amount of ammo into the boss and hoping they stop moving. Lost Planet is slightly better in that regard, but still struggles in a couple ways, so let's fix that. Unlike my other videos, I'm not going to go over every Aquid boss separately, mainly because the fights themselves are fun and offer a decent challenge. What they do need is a bit more gravitas to them, because as they stand, they are just there. No build up or anything, just kind of there. This could be quite easily solved by having them arrive or appear in a cutscene to add to the spectacle and make them feel important rather than leaving the player with a sense of, well, that just happened. Now, VS fights are much the same with the lack of build up, with the unfortunate addition that they're typically not all that fun. This is mostly due to the arenas you fight them in being very small, so small that you can barely move around or dodge. Firstly, we need to change the arenas almost entirely, mostly to something much less claustrophobic, but also to accentuate the boss's strengths. The only one that really does this at the moment is the giant spider mech in Mission 8, and it's a real disservice to the others that they can't shine themselves. Also, pilots should have some personality. Look at Titanfall 2. All the bosses you fight have their own characterization, even though they are normally around for as much time as the Lost Planet bosses are. Intro cutscenes are a must, of course, but you can also have them talk over comms, mock, goad, whatever else while the fight is happening. I frankly much prefer a fight with a character over a fight with an empty shell.
I'm done wasting time on you.
I need to talk about the final boss here from a purely mechanical standpoint, because it kind of sucks, honestly. Essentially the game is after its Gundam moment, and while I'm fine with that, it doesn't really feel good to play, mainly because to do any decent amount of damage to it you have to be in melee range and use a full charge left trigger attack. Otherwise you just do chip damage, and you do not have enough time to actually defeat them doing that. That's also not including the laser tower in the middle you have to shut down to avoid being spammed to death. along with the other attacks you have to already be dodging, otherwise you lose most of your health instantly. It just feels tedious. So let's do the following. Let's make the boss more aggressive. He mostly just backpedals and spams attacks at the moment, and I'd much prefer him to bring the fight to me and beam sword fight if I'm honest, and maybe make the laser guns actually do damage to him and his cannons rather than just the tower. Or maybe make the tower the source of his shielding, where destroying it lets you damage him. Also, maybe make the aerial controls just a little bit better, because it feels very square peg round hole as it is now. I haven't mentioned Green Eye here, and for good reason. That fight is hype as hell. It is suitably climactic and is a great ending to the first act. The only thing I'd change would maybe make the arena a lot larger than the tiny square you fight him in now. Maybe have drastically lowered T energy consumption, so you could do massive chases with it, guns blazing, thrusters burning, something very dumb and anime and extremely in keeping with the game's silliness at points. Thinking about that as well, you could have an unwinnable fight with Bandero afterwards to usher in the second act. Obviously your VS would have to be smashed to crap to not give the illusion it's winnable, but after fighting Green Eye that would be easily rationalised. And here is where we have my biggest issue with the game, and the main reason I think it was originally supposed to be an arcade title. The story, because it's disjointed, poorly paced, lacks impact, and most if not all characters suck. But I'm not here to just complain, I'm here to fix. So let's get on with it. Firstly, improve the stakes and the pacing. The story has 2 points where it spikes into real shit territory, the fight with Green Eye and the final battle for the planet. The issue is that while Green Eye being a big threat and the ultimate goal is given in the prologue, the whole Frontier project plot feels like padding and only starts being a thing in the penultimate mission. For context, the final mission is basically just a boss fight, meaning that missions 7 to 9 feel like filler. What we should do is firstly do away with the mission and level structure and have the game be a single connected map, where you are actually travelling between areas and the trailer actually gets used outside of being background dressing. This could also be used to add more areas and missions between the main sections, which would give the game more time to flesh things out. Next, we could develop the Frontier project plot from further back, so it's less of an instant 0 to 100 than it is now. To that end, we could play out the whole time skip from mission 6 and 7 with additional story beats, have Luca and Wayne find vague snippets of information as the campaign progresses, only for the full picture to be revealed after the ambush in mission 9 or whatever else the equivalent would be. Alternatively, we can have the majority of the plan be revealed, but the twist be at that point, to add some more questions as to Nevek's intentions. Next, we need to work on the characters themselves, because not one among them is altogether that memorable. They are very bland and not developed past a single cookie-cutter trope. So much so that I actually forgot who the big bad was before I ran into him in Mission 8. For the good guys, I feel like Rick should still be the engineer as he is, but play up his geeking out over VS and the like. But have Luca be more of the computer whiz. It would make Rick more focused than just a jack of all nerds, and would give Luca more of a reason to be there other than the game's mandated female character. As for Yuri, I'm fine with how he is with his secretive scientist shtick, but I would prefer him to be more active in covertly helping the heroes and covering the truth about Frontier. As he is right now, he basically disappears after mission 5. Next, we have the main villain of the piece, Henry Eisenberg. Stupid name aside, he actually gets basically no screen time and is just there. I want him to feel more like a mastermind rather than just a boss fight. He should be known from about the mission 6 mark, having him personally orchestrating the Snow Pirate extermination in a very twisted and diabolical manner. And also, I want him to be hammy. Like, unhinged hammy. I like hammy villains, sue me. Now, more eagle-eyed viewers will notice I missed off 3 people here. Basil, Bandero, and Wayne. The reason for this is the plot for these guys had so much potential but got fumbled so hard. A quick rundown, Gale, Wayne's dad, made the harmonizer, this thing that lets the wearer metabolize T-energy with the added side effect of drastically slowing the aging process. He built 2 prototypes which he attached to Basil and Bandero before Wayne's device. Bandero seemingly didn't appreciate this and betrayed them all, leading to Gale's death and Wayne being frozen solid for 30 years. He is also an amnesiac if you want to add that to your bingo card. The issue is that it doesn't get time to cook and falls into the "why do I care" territory. Bandero's relationship only comes to light properly at the ass end of the game, and Basil only explains the situation after mission 7. So, this is what we do. We play up the amnesiac angle a bit, have Wayne's memories come back disjointed, and have his chats with Basil and his encounters with Bandero settle things into place a bit. That way, the fight with Bandero at the end would have a lot more weight, and if we make the game one continuous world, we could easily fit more fights with Bandero and his men to really build on that. I am by no means a literary expert, but I imagine we could elevate this beyond what it is now. And let's be honest, Bandero needs way more time to be a bastard to people. Always love a good bastard character in my stories personally, and that, more or less, is what I would want from a Lost Planet remake. I hope you enjoyed. Do you agree? Do you not? Is there anything else you'd change? Let me know in the comments. Maybe like and subscribe if you did. I have been the Resident Gremlin, and I'll see you next time.